the battle of two young quarterbacks. Jordan Love does battle with CJ Stroud. Of course, they're not on the same field at the same time. But I'm going to preface this conversation with Jordan Love. We all think he's a good quarterback, right? Generally.
Yeah.
Now, I saw this stat from Brett Coleman earlier on. In his 4-game sample size this year, versus the Blitz, he is the third most blitzed quarterback in the 4 games. He has a 58.7 passer rating versus the Blitz, 28th in the league. 4% turnover-worthy plays, right? 5th highest out of the quarterbacks. Big-time throws, 0%. He's last. 5.3 yards per attempt. 4 INTs and 3 touchdowns versus the Blitz, right? Now, the Texans are pretty much middle of the pack when it comes to blitzing. Do you think that they should dial up a few more? Because at the moment, you bring the pressure to Jordan Love. He's not figuring it out. He's not doing so well against it. No, I'll ask you that first.
Yeah, I think with these young quarterbacks, the blitz is obviously something that teams are going to want to try to utilize here. But I think both these teams have very capable running games. The Packers are coming into this game a little banged up at the wide receiver position. I think Watson and Jaden Reed were both questionable last that I checked. But, Josh Jacobs is a guy that you can rely on giving the ball to 25 times in a game, and he will rack up the yards for you. I think that both these teams, as well as we are going to talk about their quarterbacks, I think they're both going to try to find their identity on the ground early. And it's going to come down to which team's able to utilize that to get into the lead so that they can control the game with the running game towards the end of it. I think, again, as you said, like the blitz is something that you're going to see from both these teams. I think the Packers, I do believe, have the most interceptions in the league, if I'm not mistaken. And so, obviously, they're looking to ball hawk. Their corners are all very capable. So I think it's going to be about trying to get those corners off those receivers, kind of getting them a little bit to commit to the run. And then you can start to open up that game. But the Texans, I mean, they came off a big win against the Patriots. But they did let Drake May kind of throw the rock around pretty easily. Now, they did have a relatively large lead, so you might say, all right, they were just kind of playing
It's just empty calories, right?
We'll see what that looks like. Jordan Love is a guy that will fit a ball into a tight window if you give it to him. But yeah, I think both teams are going to try to run the ball early and try to take over the game that way. So
if you look at that, so Packers are number 1 in takeaway differential, right? Plus 9. Pretty much most of that is off the back of McKinney and his 5 INTs in 6 games, making a case for himself if he continues on this stupendous form for potentially being Defensive Player of the Year. But he's got a burly man in TJ Watt always to contend with him being the peanut punch to sack man that he is. Now, Packers are second rushing yards per game at 167 yards per game. I always preface that with yes, but then you do have one game where they'd had 261 rushing yards against the Indianapolis Colts, when the Indianapolis Colts don't have a run defense at times. And this is me being an Indianapolis Colts fan. So in what way do you think the Texans can win this game? How many rushing yards do you need to hold the Packers to for them to be able to win it?
I think. Are we talking about how many rushing yards?
Texans need to hold Green Bay to stop the time of possession getting in the way.
Yeah, no, I mean, if they can keep Josh Jacobs for, I'd probably say under 100 yards. That's a step in the right direction, but don't think that's going to happen, only because they're going to lean on it. But there's a chance because Joe Mixon, I mean, he's coming off like a really good performance against the Patriots. He didn't really have like a lot of yards, but he got that yardage in 13 carries. So he's missed like a good month with like an ankle injury, and everyone was sort of trying to work out how he'd be on the way back. And he's shown that, he's lathered up now. He had his like 13 carries, 102 yards against the Patriots. So he's shown that he can still.
It's a perfect tune-up game, right? For him for this one.
Exactly. So they've got their own running back too, and I also think that outside matchup between Jair Alexandra and Stephon Diggs as well. That one's got like a lot of bad blood in it, so that's going to be really interesting. Like corners like Jair know exactly what to do because they have the history. They know the tendencies of the receiver. They know all the little details because they've had to like study him on film, etc. and whatnot. So he knows exactly how to get under Stephon Diggs' skin. So one thing I'm going to predict is a nice little meltdown at some point in the game. I'm not sure when, but we're going to get a Stephon Diggs meltdown. Whether or not that'll affect like the overall game, we'll have to see. But in a game like this, small things like that do count. I think Tank Dell's going to play well. He always finds a way to get away, especially working in the slot.
But missing Nico Collins, who's on IR, I think that's the key thing because Nico Collins is the most destructive offensive piece that the Texans have.
Yeah.
He is a game wrecker.
Yeah, so do you think Diggs can kind of flourish in that? They did bring him in for situations like this.
But he was more of key situations rather. The way that they've used him this season is a go-to guy rather than getting the yards down the field with him, if that makes sense. They tend to get to the red zone with somebody else, and then they use Diggs in those third down situations or in the red zone because he's got that craftiness as well. As great as CJ Stroud is, I can't see anyone but the Packers winning this game because just based upon who's out, right? I think Nico is such a key to that offense that I know CJ's so good, and it's really bad to rule him out of winning this game. But I'm having trouble to see anyone but the Packers winning this one, especially in Lambeau when it's getting loud.
Yeah. Go, Pat, go.
No.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of how the Texans can attack this Green Bay defense, I think it is going to have to be really short and quick. Get the ball in the receiver's hands. Again, if Joe Mixon is healthy, I know he's still a little banged up. And we talked about his run game against the Patriots, although he did have a 59-yard run in that game, which does kind of skew the stats a little bit. If he's healthy and he's good to go, they're going to utilize him in the screen game as well to try to, again, pull those corners off of the receivers to give them a little bit of separation. Tank Dell definitely became a target. He's gonna definitely get increased targets with Nico Collins out. And again, Stephon Diggs has got to be the guy who steps up in these situations. He's got to be the big play receiver. I know he doesn't have the same speed he once had, but he's got to be a guy that can stretch the field a little bit, or even do it with Tank Dell to get them both out there. But yeah, it's going to come down to which quarterback is able to hang on to the football and not force turnovers, or not turn the ball over, and then we'll see there. But this game will come down to the fourth quarter, with both teams having an opportunity to win the game.
All right, so predictions. I've already put my stake down and said I think Green Bay's going to win it. Do both of you agree?
I'm going to agree with you as well. Like, don't get me wrong, I love CJ, but I do think not having Nico over there, that's going to sort of take away that big play dynamic as far as getting down the field in a hurry. So I'm going to go with the Packers here. It's still going to be an interesting matchup to sort of see how this plays out. like I said, I can't wait to see Jair match up against Diggs. That for
So-
me is my game there.
As good as the Texans have been this year, and as good as their record states, they're not as good as their record states. They won some very, very tight games so far this
Against
year.
some bad
Games where
teams.
they really should have been blowing teams out. The way they played against the Colts, they should have won that by 2 scores. They should have beaten the Bears by 2 scores. They got blown out by the Vikings. So I just don't trust this Texans team when they face a strong opponent to necessarily take control of this game. I could easily see the Texans winning this game, very similar to how they beat the Bills. But if the Packers at home, I just think it's Green Bay at Lambeau. I think the crowd's going to be loud, especially with a strong chance this year. So I'm going to take the Packers too. I think they take control of this game late in the fourth quarter. They probably again win by a touchdown or more. So
Well, there we have it, and let's see. It's another doozy on the weekend because we've got some good matchups, and let's we'll have our breakdowns over what happened this weekend coming up next week. So be sure to catch those videos too.